Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, friends. Thanks a lot for listening to yet another episode of Pushing Beyond the Obvious. And I'm your host, Mukesh Gupta. As you know, we've been talking about leadership for the past few episodes. And this entire season is dedicated to leadership and how do you become an effective leader. One of the things, or probably one of the most important things, and in terms of time, the maximum time that leaders spend on is communicating with people, whether it is communicating up, whether it is communicating to the people that they lead, whether it is communicating with their peers, whether they are on stage, whether they are in front of their teams. Absolutely critical area to nail down as a leader is the ability to do clear and effective communication. And in order to discuss that today, I'm super glad to host Col Fink. Just to introduce, give some context, I'm still a part of the Thought Leaders Business School, which is being run out of Australia by Matt Church. And Cole was one of the faculty there. And I have attended numerous sessions that he's hosted. One of the specialities that he brings to the table is the ability to clearly and effectively communicate things which are complex in ways which are simple to understand, simple to follow, and easy, makes things that are complex and difficult seem simple and easy. So no pressure, Cole.
I was going to say, you've just introduced me, and now everybody listening to this is going to be like, well, we'll see. But thank you, Mukesh. That's very kind of you.
Yeah. So that said, I'd also want you to quickly introduce yourself, the body of work that you've done, and what's your current focus as we go along.
Yeah, sure. So in terms of a body of work, I have written 2 books. One is called Speakership. I wrote that with Matt Church and Sasha Coburn. It's a book about the art of public speaking, and obviously leadership and communication are both central to standing at the front of a room and commanding the attention of a group of people and communicating effectively. My second book is called Tribe of Learning, and it is also a book about leadership and communication. And if speakership is about the art of standing on stage and communicating with your voice and your body, then Tribe of Learning is about the art of thinking about the experience of the people in the room there with you and the journey that they are on. There's this weird paradox in public speaking and in leadership in general, where in some sense it's all about you, because you're the one up the front of the room, you're the one who decides what's going to happen, you're the one making the executive decisions, whatever, it's all about you. But paradoxically, it's not about you at all, because you're not actually the one that does any of the work. You're not the one that gets out there and is in the field and in the trenches and all that kind of stuff. And so there's this interesting paradox where it's all about you, but it's not about you at all. And so my 2 books, I think, that I've written so far are Speakership is It's All About You. So we're trying to help you kind of understand yourself, find your ideal styles of communication, give you the confidence and the skills and the expertise to get on stage and be entertaining and engaging and compelling and clear as a speaker. And Tribe of Learning is not about you at all. It's about understanding the people who you're with, the journey that they're on, how you can create an environment where they can succeed. And I feel like the 2 books kind of work together quite nicely, because if you're the leader in a business, then you're going to have to exercise leadership skills all the time, and often as a public speaker. But you're also definitely got a group of people who, like all engaged members of staff, and I would say for many businesses, most of your engaged clients are on a journey of personal growth where they're learning constantly. And that's what Tribe of Learning is about. Every single one of your employees or the people who you are leading should feel like they are growing as a person and exploring new territory and breaking new ground. And if they don't, you're either going to have to give them a huge pay rise or they're going to go. So those are my 2 existing books. I'm actually writing another book now called The Solo Pro. So I am a solo professional. I run a business which is really me. I am the business. And I've learned a lot over the last 10 to 12 years of running a business like that. And I wanted to capture it all in a book. So that is my current project. And I don't know, let's say Christmas, just to light a rocket under my bum. That's the goal.
So this is super. So I know, as a matter of fact, that you also teach public speaking as one of your business as well, and you
Yep.
also help people be better public speakers from that point of view. So my first question to kick us off is, what are the most common mistakes that people do when they are trying to communicate?
Oh, there's many. I think particularly in a public speaking arena. So people communicate in a different way. And I'm sure you experience this yourself. I'm sure you observe it in others. And I'd imagine nearly anyone listening will be able to identify with both feelings themselves and also observing it in others. But people show up in a very different way when we have a speech to deliver. So there's going to be a stage and a lectern, and you have 20 minutes, right? Compared to if you're just in a team meeting and you start talking and you're leading the group. There's two really different people that show up in those two situations. And so the first and most common mistake is that the person who shows up when we are speaking isn't really us. There's this weird, often kind of cardboard cutout character that shows up instead of the real me. And because humans are authenticity sniffer dogs, if that makes sense. So like in the same way that a sniffer dog can smell cocaine from 100 meters away, humans can sniff inauthenticity. We can sniff when someone is putting on a facade. We just know if you are the real you or not. And so often people show up and start to talk, and everyone in the audience, even if they've never met you before, they just know this is an act. That's not the real you. And so the first and most common mistake is not having learned how to be yourself when you're speaking to a large group. There is this bug in the human operating system that causes us to react to opportunities to speak in public with the fight or flight physiological response. And obviously fight or flight is great if you're getting attacked by a lion on the African savannah where we evolved, but it's not useful if you're standing in a boardroom or an auditorium. It's not that useful to have your adrenaline spike, to have your heart rate go through the roof, to have all the saliva in your mouth disappear. And so one of the key mistakes that people make is not having yet learned how to be themselves. And it is something that you can accelerate, but it is largely around practice. The very first time you ever speak to a group, you probably will have a reaction. The other main one that I see nearly every time, it's a very, very common issue. When someone is given a formal opportunity to speak, whether they specifically and explicitly ask themselves this question or not, I think the majority of speeches that are written are an answer to the question, what am I going to say? Oh, I've been given 20 minutes at the company conference. What am I going to say? Oh, I've got 15 minutes to talk to the team about Project X. What am I going to say? Whether we realize it or not, our speech is an answer to the question, what am I going to say? And a lot of people will literally say that to themselves. Shit, what am I going to say? And they sit down and start trying to work out what they're going to say. I reckon that's a mistake, because what am I going to say makes it all about you. And like I discussed a little earlier, the paradox of public speaking is that while it is kind of about you, because you're the one on stage and you're the one talking, it's not about you at all. It's about the audience. It's about the people you're communicating to. You're, in a sense, the least important person in the room because you're the one that already knows everything that you're going to talk about. So you don't matter. And so I wish that if I could just change the first thing that popped into their mind when they were given an opportunity to speak, if I could just, like in the Matrix, just insert a chip where suddenly change the way everyone's brains work, I would make it so that when someone was told, hey, you've got 20 minutes to speak about your project at the company conference, that they would say, great, what do I want the audience to do? What am I trying to give to the audience? How are the audience going to react to this? What would be useful for the audience to know? What you say doesn't matter. What they do or think or react or act in response, that's what matters. So ask yourself that. If you've got 20 minutes to speak about your project and you need 5 more staff to volunteer to get on board, then that's the thing you want. What do I want them to do? I want them to volunteer to get involved. Okay, great. Now we've got something to talk about. So the big mistake, what am I going to say? No one cares. What do you want them to do? Start there and then let your speech evolve.
Very interesting, because I've made the mistake countless number of times. Every time you get a topic and you are invited to present, that's typically the response is, okay, now that I have the time, what do I want to do, or what do I want to say?
Yeah.
What I've also realized is, as a leader, if I am given the opportunity to kind of address the audience from a leadership context, let's say if it is a town hall, if it's a team meeting or whatever it is, one of the other mistakes that I've seen, which is very closely related to what you just said, is also assuming that the audience knows as much as we do.
Totally.
And you kind of talk about things for which you understand the context. You know what's the data that kind of gives meaning to what you're saying, without realizing that the audience may not necessarily either have the context or have the data or information to make sense of what you're saying. So which means that you communicate, but it doesn't land because people are clueless about what you're talking. Or that's the best outcome. The worst outcome is that people say, okay, you don't know what you're talking about, and therefore you lose your credibility as a leader, and people just simply don't trust you anymore. And that's probably the worst outcome that you can have. You were about to say something.
Yeah, I feel like I'm 44 years old now, and I'm not sure that I've understood this for a long time. But I have, as I've aged, learned that our conception of how other people's minds work might be a lot less accurate than we really thought it was. Like, the way that we imagine how other people think is pretty much just, well, how would I think in that situation? And then if it turns out that they don't think like you, then there's this sudden collapse in understanding because you weren't anticipating how they think. And so there are 1,000,001 different models for thinking. And what I find super, super useful prior to writing a speech is to ask myself a couple of super basic questions about the audience, so that I don't write anything. I don't create any content, don't make a slide, don't have an idea, don't do anything until I've spent some time pondering the audience. And there's a few things that I think are super useful to ask. The first is, who is in the audience? And you can answer that depending on the size of the meeting. You might answer it with individual names because there's going to be these 6 board members and this VP and whatever. You could be answering it with their representations of where they're from. So you might say there are 7 people from the government department, there are 15 people from this company, there are 15 people from that company. You might think of them as job titles. So there are going to be 50% project managers, there are going to be 20% middle managers, there are going to be, do you know what I mean? Like, divide the audience up into a group. Then ask yourself, who among that group do I really care about the most? Now, sometimes it'll be everyone in the audience, but often, in fact, I would say usually, there's actually a portion of the audience who are much more important to you and the goals that you're trying to achieve than some of the other members of the audience. And so if there are particular members of the audience whose opinions or reactions to your speech particularly matter, then you're going to want to design a presentation that is specifically tailored to them. So I like to ask myself, who's in the audience and who do I really care about? From there, the next one is, so there's people, right? These are all P's, so they're easy to remember. Who are the people in the room? The second one is the problems. So what are the problems that they are currently facing that are relevant to the conversation that I want to have? What are they frustrated about? What barriers do they face? If they were to, clock off in the afternoon and ring their spouse on the way home, what are they whinging about? Like, ask yourself what is currently annoying them or frustrating them with regard to the topic that I'm going to be talking about. And then the final P is purpose. What do they want? Like, why are they even coming to this speech? Like, you might say, well, they have to because it's a company conference and they've been forced to come along. But if they were coming to listen to you with some purpose in mind, what would that be? What are that like? If the problems are the stick that they're running away from, then the purpose is the carrot that they're running towards. What is the possibility that exists if you and them understand each other a little better? If you know the people in the room, you know the problems they've got, and you know the purpose that they have for being in the room, and you start there before you create any content, build any slides, write any script, whatever, you're in a way better place because you've at least thought about what the world is like for them before you begin.
And what about what do I want to achieve as a result of having delivered this? Is that important at all, or is that not? Does the other three P's cover what I want to achieve as well?
No, you've forced me into a corner here. I have to admit there are two more P's. So one of the P's is plan, which is your plan. So usually when you speak, you're speaking for a reason. You might be speaking to try to generate business. That's a specialty of mine. I'm often teaching people to speak not just to share information, but to create commercial opportunity. You might be speaking to enroll more people in a project, right? To get them excited about it and get them to start tipping in some of their discretionary energy. You might be speaking because you want people to give you the green light for something, right? But you've got a plan, and the speech is part of your plan. And so what I want to know is, why are you speaking? I want to generate business. I want to get a green light for my project, whatever. Like, it's just one thing. What do you want? What do you want out of the speech? And specifically, how are you going to get that? And so if you're speaking to generate business, I hear this from so many people. I go, why are you speaking at all? What's your plan? They go, oh, I want to get more work. I go, great. What do you want to happen? Well, I want people to call me up and book my services. Okay, cool. How are you going to make that happen? Oh, well, I was just going to speak and hope for the best. No, let's have a plan. Like, can we include something in your speech that encourages them to call you? Can you have a value card that sits in the show bag or whatever that gets put on every seat that has your phone number and an invitation to call? Can there be some kind of interactive exercise in your speech that connects them onto your website and gives them an opportunity to leave their details? Like, can we have a plan, please? And then, if you want to go all the way to the end, the last P is a prescription. And so this is where you get to tell them what you want them to do. And so often out of a speech, especially if it's a very specific audience and you know who they are and exactly what you want them to do, you can literally tell them, hey, what I'd love you to do for now, step 1, step 2, step 3, like give them a clear prescription. And if it's a more broad audience, you might give them a prescription along the lines of, hey, why don't you go back to your organization, ask yourself these 3 questions. Like, it's going to depend on the situation. But if you've got a plan for your speech, you know the people in the room, you know the problems they face, the purpose they're there for, and you've got a prescription to give them at the end, well, now you've got something to build a speech around. And it's going to serve your commercial goals. It's going to serve the audience's interests and needs. And both of you are more likely to come away happy and fulfilled as a result of the 20 minutes or hour or 90 minutes or whatever that you spend together.
And this applies to people who are planning to deliver a public speech. It also applies to leaders who are going to do a town hall. It also applies to a leader who is just running a team meeting in terms of, what is it exactly that they want to achieve out of everybody's time. And yeah. I personally feel that, so much of time is wasted because the leaders are not willing to do the work ahead of time to be clear on what is it that they want to achieve and have a clear plan in terms of how they want to achieve from them being in front of others. So it can be both internal, external audience or whatever. So
yeah, I totally think It's a failure to understand opportunity cost. So if you have 50 people in a room that are going to listen to you for an hour, that is a very busy, overtime filled week's worth of someone's time invested in listening to you. And imagine if you were going to have a single person sit and listen to you for 50 hours a week in a week. Like, that would be an enormous imposition on that person. Like, it would be utterly unfair. You would never do it. And yet for some reason, take an hour out of 50 people's time. And there are some leaders, not good leaders, I'd suggest, but there are some leaders who treat that much too flippantly. The opportunity cost of bringing groups of people together is massive. There are so many other things that we could be doing with our time, whether it be productively spending it at work, whether it be spending it at home, relaxing, connecting with family, friends, whatever. Like, there are many, 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 many valuable ways that the people in your audience could be spending their time, and they have sacrificed all of that opportunity to listen to you. So you better work hard to make that opportunity worthwhile for them and for yourself, or it's a dereliction of your duty as the leader in that moment. And you won't be invited back.
Unless, people are forced to because you are their leader. That's a different thing. But then you don't get the influence that you need to have.
Yeah, you're not going to last long in the role. You're not going to last long in the role.
So when I think of communication and think of communication from a leader's point of view, people communicate for one of three reasons, according to me. Maybe right, maybe wrong. So people communicate to inform, as to know what's happening, what people need to do. So information is one. Inspiration is one. So, saying that, okay, yes, we can do it. Let's go for it. Whatever inspiration. So you need to communicate to inform, you communicate to inspire. And last but not the least, you communicate to bring people together, just to connect and create a community or a conversation. So are there things that you see which are different when it comes to communication for information versus communication for inspiration versus communication for connection?
Yeah, great question. So firstly, I think communication for information is usually better done at other times. So if you're just say, for example, when you go to a conference, the first thing that happens is they point out where the toilets are and that kind of stuff. It's so low value. Like, there are other better ways to tell us where the toilets are. Just put up a really big sign that shows us where the toilets are. Or give us some kind of card at the beginning. Like, I hate it when the MC spends the first 10 minutes just giving us random information, because there are other better ways to communicate it. Equally, large volumes of data, most people can absorb much more easily and with better attention if you communicate it in a written form. Like, give it to us in a bunch of dot points or in a graph or something like that. If the only point of communicating is information, generally speaking, I'd say don't bother bringing everyone together. Bringing everyone together, that sounds like a time to inspire people. That sounds like a time to connect people. If you just want to inform them, send them an email. But inspiring and connecting people, I think, is very difficult, bordering on impossible to do with things like email and Slack and those kinds of things. Social media of whatever format, whether it be Facebook or Slack groups, like internal company communications platforms, all that sort of stuff. I feel like those tools can help to maintain connections between people, but they very rarely form new strong bonds between people. They very rarely spread social connection in a really effective way. And so, I've worked remotely most of my adult life at this point, certainly for the last 15 years. And all the best bonds that I've created with team and staff in organizations that I've been a part of, or with clients, has been where we came together physically and we had these synchronous experiences together that inspired and connected us. And then those other tools just to help to keep the connections together until we were able to come together again.
And from an inspiration point of view, so is there anything that you think leaders can do, or the communication needs to be different when it comes to inspiring people?
Inspiring people, there isn't a formula, I don't reckon, for inspiring people. Like if you came to me and said, right, I need to inspire an audience around this idea, I can't go, okay, step 1, we do this, and step 2, we do that, and step 3, we do that. It's inspiration is one of those magical things that is difficult to tangibly hold on to, but you know when you're in its presence. And so I think there are certainly things that we can bring to help inspire people around something. Chief among them, I reckon, is enthusiasm. So Kevin Kelly is one of my favorite all-time, I don't know if you want to call him a thought leader or a public intellectual or just a cool guy.
By the way, he was on the show as well.
Oh, really? Oh, he's the best. Wow, I'm so jealous. I love that guy. So when he was 70 years old, he created a blog post that was like Kevin Kelly's 70 tips for turning 70. And one of the ones that he shared was that enthusiasm is worth 25 IQ points. So a person who has an IQ of 100 and is enthusiastic is as effective as a person with an IQ of 125. And I believe it, and I would maybe even add a few more IQ points. I reckon enthusiasm is grossly underrated. Now, that might be a biased thing because I'm naturally quite enthusiastic, but also I think enthusiasm is grossly underrated. And one of the things that's a shame about public speaking is that sometimes when people are placed onto the stage and they have that fight or flight reaction and they're not ready for that experience, the enthusiasm that they do have for the topic gets lost in their fear of the situation that they're in. Generally speaking, if someone is going to inspire an audience around an idea, that person is going to be enthusiastic about the idea. I believe, I could be wrong, but I believe the word enthusiasm means to be possessed with the energy of the gods. And like, that's probably from Greek or Latin or something, but don't you think that's cool? Like to be possessed with the energy of the gods. And it's like, if you're in the presence of someone who's enthusiastic about something, sometimes it's hard to resist. You know what I mean? Like you're like, oh, I want a piece of that energy. I want a piece of that action. I too want to be possessed of the energy of the gods. And so if you're going to inspire people around an idea, I reckon absolute number one thing, you've got to be enthusiastic about it. If you don't have energy for it, don't expect your audience to. They're going to mirror you. And there's a bunch of other things you can do as well. And in a kind of mechanical sense, I think the main one is probably, can you show us a picture? Can you paint a picture of possibility for the audience? Can you give us a sense of where we are now and a sense of where we could go? Because if the future is a big dark cloud with no form or shape, or do you know what I mean? Like we're not going to be inspired to run off into that. Whereas if you can paint a picture of a rainbow with a pot of gold at the end of it, right? And whether that be talking about phases of a project and where you're going to get to or whatever, can you give us a coherent understanding of the journey that we can embark on should we choose to get inspired by this thing? And excited by the risk reward, basically. Like any time we're making a decision, we're basically asking ourselves, is the reward of doing this thing higher than the cost or the risk that I'm exposing myself to? If you can paint a picture of a journey where the reward is greater than the risk and you're excited about it as you share that journey, I think you're probably going to inspire a few people to get on board.
Yeah. And I also feel that apart from enthusiasm, as a leader, if we are ourselves not inspired, we cannot inspire others. So the inspiration needs to come from within, and that then spreads amongst people. And when you add the fire of enthusiasm, I think the inspiration can spread faster than and farther than it would otherwise. So
totally agree.
You brought up a very interesting point in terms of the ability to paint a picture. So a lot of times it is equal to kind of the ability to tell a story.
Yeah.
So how important is storytelling, and how does one go about learning to tell stories? I know that there are some people who are naturally gifted at telling stories, at telling jokes and getting people excited. And then there are certain people who are kind of, very logical and bullet point kind of, that's the way their brains work. Someone like me, my brain works in bullet points. So how do you take someone like that and help them with the ability to tell stories and the ability to paint a picture in the future?
Yeah, great question. So I think storytelling is one of a suite of options, of ways that we can communicate an idea. And Matt Church shared, I talked before about there are lots of models of thinking, like there are lots of ways of thinking about how other people's minds work. And I'd love to describe one that I use a lot. And Matt Church invented it. It's called the pink sheet. But in its simplest form, I think it's pretty easy for most people to conceive that ideas exist on a spectrum from big picture down to fine detail. And so, for example, if double entry bookkeeping, right, is an idea of where you enter an item into your bookkeeping software when the purchase is made, and then you double enter it when it aligns with the bank statement, blah, 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 right? And then there's the word precision. And I think precision is a big idea, of which double entry bookkeeping is a specific example. So double entry bookkeeping is like a detailed idea that lives down the bottom of that spectrum. Love is a big idea. How a laser functions is a detailed idea, right? And so there's this spectrum of ideas. And I actually really love, if you explore Wikipedia, and Wikipedia articles are all written with the same basic structure to introduce the topic at the beginning in the first paragraph. And if you open any random Wikipedia page and click on the first link, which opens another Wikipedia page, and click on the first link, which opens another Wikipedia page. So let's say, for example, you chose Michael Jordan as your first page. You click on Michael Jordan, it'll say something like, Michael Jordan was an NBA basketballer. And you click on NBA because that's the first link. And you go to NBA and it says NBA is a basketball league. And you click on basketball, that's the first link. And it says basketball is a ball sport. And you go to ball sports. And then it says ball sports are part of sports. And you go to sports. And what you're doing is you're actually going up this hierarchy of ideas from detailed, Michael Jordan, specific, to the big idea of sports in general. And the funny thing about Wikipedia is if you go all the way, starting at any page at all on Wikipedia, you will always end up at philosophy. Because philosophically, we have to decide, is a chair a chair? Anyway, there's a spectrum from fine detailed ideas to big picture ideas. One of the keys to leadership is being able to learn to navigate that spectrum. We've all sat in a presentation where the presenter was mired in the detail, and we in the audience just wanted to zoom out and get a look at the bigger picture, please. Less common, but still it occasionally happens, is someone will speak in these big generalities and we're just wishing they would dive into the detail and give us something to hang on to. So being able to navigate this spectrum from detail to big picture is really important. With that, we can introduce the idea of left brain thinking and right brain thinking. And Mukesh, you talked about being a dot point thinker. So that's very structured, which is stereotypically left brain. Okay. Now it doesn't matter that the whole left hemisphere and right hemisphere are more complex than this. I still find it a useful model for thinking. Left brain thinking tends to be structured, tends to be analytical, scientific, that kind of thing. Mathematics, for example, definitely lives over there. Right brain thinking tends to be creative, expressive, art and story tends to live over here. And so if you combine the idea of from fine detail to big picture, left brain to right brain, you end up with this kind of quadrant, this spectrum. And I think most people end up living naturally in one of those corners. And so an accountant stereotypically is going to be a detail left brain thinker. On the other hand, a crystal singing bowls practitioner stereotypically is going to be a right brain, big picture. They're off in the clouds. And if we can learn to communicate an idea across that whole spectrum, if we can learn to communicate the big picture and the fine detail, if we can learn to communicate the left brain and the right brain, then it doesn't matter what type of thinker we have in the audience, we're going to have given them something that they can attach onto. And so if you're going to really effectively communicate an idea, yes, I think you need to be good at telling stories. I also think you need to be good at sharing data. I also think you need to be good at explaining the models, so like the structure of the ideas, how they fit together. And finally, and this is one that few people have grasped, but I think there's an enormous amount of possibility for growth here, is can you use metaphor to help people understand what you're talking about? So if you can use metaphor, models, stories, and data to communicate your points, you're going to give everyone in the audience an opportunity to understand what it is you're truly talking about, even if they don't resonate with any one particular bit of what you were saying.
Yeah, I think, I don't know whether you said this or Matt said this. This is called full spectrum thinking.
Yeah.
Did I get that right?
Yeah, exactly.
Super. So switching gears a little bit here, one of the things that most leaders are now being forced to do because of COVID is to present virtually and talk to a screen in a way, or to a lens in a way. I've seen you and Cam, the brother, do these sessions on LinkedIn, the videos that I see on LinkedIn, amazingly well. I see you, just carrying a phone into a supermarket and talking into the phone and communicating an idea really well. Resonates a lot with a lot of people. So are there any tips and tricks that you have for leaders to, number one, get comfortable sharing a lot more to a screen, on a phone? Because I feel that a lot of times leaders can get a lot more done if they would rather just quickly shoot a video and send it to their team rather than typing in an email, because then there is a lot of possibility of misinterpretation, possibility of confusion. Whereas if you, best is to speak in person, but if not, then if you can just send a video, it is much more effective than sending out an email, right? So what are some of the tips and tricks that you have for leaders to do this?
Totally. So the first one is, usually when we use our phones, we use it with the screen facing us and we use the front facing camera. And what that does is it makes you look at yourself. Like, have you noticed that most selfie videos, you're not looking at the camera lens, you're looking at the person who's filming that selfie video is looking at themselves on the screen. Well, that's a recipe for feeling self-conscious, don't you think? You're literally looking at an image of yourself, at a video of yourself talking in real time. So the first trick is use the other side of the camera, like use the normal camera facing away from the screen and turn the phone around so that you're not looking at yourself. It gets you out of your own head in a really effective way, I find. At least it's a lot easier to get out of that self-consciousness because you just can't see yourself now. The phones, they have a wide enough camera lens angle that you don't have to worry whether you're in shot or not. If you're pointing at yourself, you're in it. So that's the first one. The second one is, like anything, it's a skill that you can get good at. And I would argue that it's actually a skill that's really easy to get good at. And that the only reason most people suck at it is because most people never do it. And so if there's a leader listening to this thinking, yeah, I would love to shoot videos to communicate more effectively with my team, because I do find that typing out emails takes 5 times longer, for one, than just saying it would have. And number 2, there's opportunities for miscommunications or misunderstandings because they didn't understand my energetic intent in sharing that idea. I would say to that leader, would you be willing to spend 5 minutes a day, 5 minutes a day, talking to your phone in the evening? Would you be willing to just turn your phone onto video mode, sit it on a bookshelf or something, or just hold it in as a selfie and walk around and just tell your phone what happened that day? Talk about any challenges you had at work. Talk about the result of your daughter's basketball game. Just talk to the camera. You don't have to send the video to anyone. You don't even have to watch it yourself if you don't want to. Just talk to the camera for 5 minutes. Like, it's not a long time. It's not a huge time commitment. I reckon if you do that for 7 days or for 14 days, so you've just practiced for half an hour or an hour in total of talking to a camera, you get over that weird little barrier that we have where we feel like we have to turn up as a weird non-us version of ourselves when we're talking to a camera. 5 minutes a day for like a week or 2 or 3 is actually all it takes to get over it. And then you can turn on a camera and just start talking, and it's really you. And you communicate in a relatively normal way, and you just suddenly, and like, so this is how I communicate with my assistant a lot. I just flick on my phone recorder and go, hey Gino, I was thinking about this, can you blah, 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 bang, send. Way more efficient, heaps easier for me and better for him because he knows exactly what I'm on about. It doesn't take a lot of practice. 5 minutes a day, just do it.
So that kind of, gets me into the thought about leverage. So what you did was leveraging technology to improve productivity for yourself and at the same time improve effectiveness as well. So you did both, so effectiveness and efficiency. So are there any other things that you think leaders could do in order to leverage, through their communications?
Totally. I think most leaders resist the opportunity to speak in public more than they should. There is enormous leverage in finding the courage to talk to groups. If it's internal, there is enormous leverage in creating that inspiration and connection that you talked about, Mukesh. There is enormous leverage in using group opportunities to stand up and create that inspiration, to create that connection, and to create the momentum that will lead into projects, being executed on time or more effectively and all that kind of stuff. There's a huge amount of leverage in the natural response that humans have to an inspiring leader. We evolved to follow someone. That is how tribal society worked. Public speaking was our system of governance. It was how we survived. It was how we thrived. And yet now, given the opportunity, a lot of people are like, oh no, I don't need to call the team together. I'll just send an email. You are missing a huge opportunity for leverage. We could have 5 or 10 or 15 minutes together that could transform the energy of this team for a month if you just had the courage to lean in and lead properly, not lead with characters on a screen, but with your energy and your voice and your enthusiasm. There's a huge opportunity for leverage there. Equally, so I mentioned earlier, I do a reasonable amount of coaching people and mentoring people in public speaking, and specifically public speaking for commercial opportunity generation. If you're a lawyer or an accountant or anyone in professional services who has to do business development, right? That is phone call after phone call after phone call. It's networking. It's a massive component of your workload. The leverage that is available to you in accepting public speaking opportunities to position yourself as the expert in a particular area of your expertise, it means that you can have the same impact in one hour speech as it would have taken you to have 200 individual phone calls. That is leverage out the wazoo. And yet people resist it because they resist public speaking. So yeah, I'm very committed to the idea that there's leverage in the very oldest aspects of humanity, the fact that we respond so powerfully to quality spoken leadership. And I wish more leaders would take on the challenge and have the courage to accept the challenge of developing themselves to be able to do that well. I know it's not easy. It's taken me 10 years to get to be reasonably good at it, but the benefits are gigantic.
So I think we are nearing to the end of the time that we have for today. So 3 questions that I generally ask all my guests. One, we are living in an age where it is so important for us to continually learn and upgrade ourselves in order to stay relevant, even just to stay where we are, forget about thriving or doing better. So my question to you is, what is your method of learning and staying current, and not just staying current, but also, kind of uh, such that you are doing good for yourself?
So I love learning. I think learning is one of the great joys of human existence. I mean, I wrote a book called Tribe of Learning because I'm so excited by the opportunities that learning produces. I like to think of myself as a eternally curious person. And I think the absolute key to learning is awareness. If you can expand your awareness, then you expand the possibility of the universe around you. And so I often teach this with public speaking, but I think it's true of everything. So if someone is watching another person speak, in some sense, you can just kind of sit in the audience and absorb the information and just kind of be a member of the audience and get taken along for the ride. Just watch the performance, enjoy the performance, and maybe you like it and maybe you don't. Or you can sit up above the whole performance and ask yourself what's really going on. If rather than just being inspired by a great speaker, if you can expand your awareness and go, how are they inspiring this audience? What did they just do to make everybody laugh? What did they just do to make everybody talk to the person next to them in a way that was really open and honest? See more than just what is there in front of you. Like, ask yourself what's really going on under this. It's almost like if you're at a magic show, you can just watch the magic and enjoy being tricked, or you can look for the mirrors, you can look for the string, you can look for the sleight of hand. Where leadership is concerned, I always want you to be looking for the magic. Because if you can see another speaker or another leader do something effective and just start to grasp, oh, I think I just noticed something about that, well, then your possibility for your own capability massively expanded in that moment. And even if you don't know how to do it yet, and even if you don't know who to teach you that yet, and even if you don't know when you're going to do it next, the fact that you could even observe it totally changed your universe. And now you have an opportunity to grow into this whole new space. So anything you want to get good at, I think the fundamental skill is choose to grow your awareness in that space. The bigger your awareness, the bigger the possibility for growth.
Super. And any resource that you think people could actually go to at all, that you think has had a significant impact for you in your own learning?
I don't think there's any substitute for being somewhere live. If you want to see leadership done well, sure, you can watch a Barack Obama speech and enjoy the fact that he's an incredible orator, or you can watch, Oprah Winfrey or someone like that speak on YouTube. You can learn from that, and I do that still, but I don't think there's any substitute for being live where someone is leading. And you can learn a lot from great leaders, but you can still learn a lot from people who are learning themselves. You can learn a lot from leaders who are making mistakes and getting it wrong. If you can observe what their mistake was, that's expanding your possibility as much as observing what their skill was, because you're learning more about the craft. So, I mean, the main thing I would suggest is don't lock yourself at home hoping that you're going to be a great leader in 5 years. It's probably not going to happen. I think it might have been Zig Ziglar that said leadership's a contact sport. Like, you've got to go out and do it. That would be my primary recommendation. Don't hide away. Get yourself out there.
So is there one piece of advice that has either significantly helped you or has significantly hindered you?
So my speaking mentor was Matt Church, who I ended up writing the speakership book with. And I remember one particular piece of advice, which might sound fairly sort of small and immaterial, if that makes sense, but it had a profound impact on how I approach speaking. And I think I asked him, like, what music should I play when I'm doing my presentations? If I'm getting the audience to talk to each other, should I just play top 40 hits? Should it be Taylor Swift or, whatever's popular at the time, or what? And he said to me, play music that you like. And I was like, huh? I had not considered that at all. He said, play music you like. And I was like, but I like really weird music. Like, the stuff that I like is not going to be popular. He goes, who cares? Play music that's going to put you in a good mood. Play music that's going to energize you. Play music that's going to fire your inspiration and your enthusiasm. Because by far, the biggest influence in the entire room and the experience of being in that room is your energy. That's going to have 10 times more influence than the music that you play. So play music that brings your energy up and turns you into the person you want to be to lead that room, and then the room will follow you. And it fundamentally changed the music that I play, and I now play bizarre music in my presentations, and I love it. But I also think of that as a metaphor for everything about speaking. Like, it means that I want my entire day set up to put me in a great mood, to be excited and relaxed and comfortable going towards a presentation, because nothing is more important than the energy that I'm projecting when I go and stand at the front and command the attention of that group of people. So yeah, play your own music, make yourself happy.
Strange paradox, right? So on one end, we say that we don't matter. On the other end, we say our state matters.
Exactly. You're the most important person in the room and you don't matter at all. Both of them are true.
Super. So last question for the conversation today. The show is called Pushing Beyond the Obvious. So what is so obvious to you, but people miss all the time, that makes you go, "Ugh!"
Oh, I know this one. I wrote a whole book about it. So Tribe of Learning is about creating an environment where people can learn and grow and become a better version of themselves. And there's a line in the book that says something to the effect of, great leaders give their people a space to explore rather than a path to follow. You can't tell someone insight. You can't just talk and make someone think like you. We can't take your way of thinking and just implant it in someone else. You can't tell someone anything. The only thing you can do is create the conditions where they may come to a realization. And yet almost everyone that speaks is just trying to tell the audience something. Don't speak to tell them something. Speak to create a space in which they might have a realization. I see it in sport a lot. So I love ultimate frisbee and I spend a lot of time coaching there. And I see less experienced coaches in ultimate and every other sport trying to tell their charges. You have to do this, you have to do that, you have to do this. And you can just see it going in one ear and out the other. And they're going to run back out on the field and make all the same mistakes because all the coach did was tell the team, you have to do this or you have to do that. What a great coach does is create a space where a team can come to a realization themselves of what they need to do, of what's important and how they have to think about it and how they have to attack it. So this is difficult to do. There's not I can't tell you how to do it, ironically. But every time someone speaks, what I would like them to do is to use their expertise and their knowledge and their enthusiasm and their insight to create a space within which the audience can take the steps forward that they want to, that they can come to the realizations that they come to, that their awareness can expand in their control. You can't make the audience do or think or understand anything. All you can do is give them an opportunity. And if you do it that way, what I tend to find is the audience will be more open to it and they will make those realizations and they will come with you on the journey. If you just try to tell them to do it, it's like a jockey whipping a horse. It's got a use by date.
I remember one of my mentors, Boris Munshi, telling me once, do not disrespect the intelligence of your audience.
Yeah.
It stayed with me forever.
Yep,
anyway, so
totally.
Thank you so much, Cole, for spending the hour with me and my audience. I'm pretty sure there are lots and lots of insights and nuggets that people can take back to their to their work, to their lives. And yeah, thank you so much for spending time with us. Before we conclude, can you please tell people where they can find more information about you and your coaching program?
Sure thing. So you can find me at Col Fink, COLFINK.com. And I'm lucky enough to have a weird enough name that if you just Google Col Fink, you'll find me on LinkedIn, you'll find me Instagram or anywhere else. And yeah, please reach out. If you've got any questions or if this has sparked anything, I love to get feedback and ideas from anywhere and everywhere. So feel free to reach out if you so desire. And Mukesh, thanks very much for a wonderful conversation and for the opportunity to chat to you. I've had lots of fun.
Thank you so much.